Hello, everybody. My name is Darren Clark. I'm from UK Trade and Investment. We're going to do a presentation on getting started in exports as an SME. Topics I'm going to cover very quickly today is rationale for exporting, where to export to, key considerations, and who are UKTI and how can we help. So, why should companies export? Quite simply, if you export, you're more likely to stay in business. You take less risk as a result of this because you're expanding the risk that you would take through numerous markets, and as a result, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Why would you want to export? Quite simply, you can achieve levels of growth you can't get domestically. Again, you're increasing resilience of your revenues and profits because you're not putting everything into one basket. You are sharing your risk. You're sharing fluctuations in your business by demand, by supply, and also by exchange rates. You can achieve economies of scale. You can buy from your manufacturers on a higher level. You can negotiate better deals. And importantly, you can increase the commercial lifespan of your product and services because every market is at different stages of development. Some are very developed, some are less developed, and your product shelf life can be much longer. You can improve the financial performance and productivity of your company as well as boost your profile because it's much more internationally recognized. Where would you export to? This is where we currently export to in the UK, from the UK. The US by far #1, followed by Germany, Netherlands, France. But this is changing. Over the last decade, Europe has always been #1, but as you can see, over the next 10 years, the high growth markets, the new economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, etc. will be coming to the forefront. As you can see here, why are these coming to the forefront? They have a significant influence. They have huge populations. They have huge growth. They have a huge new middle market. It's a whole new area for exporters to go to. Other areas we should consider are the civets: Colombia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Egypt, Turkey, and South Africa. Again, these are very high growth markets. They're the markets of the future, and if we can get in early, you can establish your company, establish what you're doing, and get a well-known brand before the competition, even though we're there. Ease of doing business. There's a lot of countries that are actually much easier to do business than you expect. These include places like South Korea, Georgia, Thailand, Malaysia. A lot of these countries we don't think about doing business in, but perhaps we should consider them. So, are you ready to export? Key considerations. Is there a market for what we do? There's no point going to any market in the world unless you've done research to see if there is demand. Can I service the needs of that market now and in the future? You have to understand that if you get a big order, that may lead to extra orders. How will you cope? Do you need more resource? Do you need more people? Do you need to get a new structure in place? Do you need an export manager, logistical manager? You have to consider all these. Do you have the competencies in your business? Well, once you start exporting, you have different challenges, different paperwork, different logistics, different exchange rates. How are you going to get money from one border to the other? You have to consider all of this. So as a result, keep on thinking, what do I need to do to take this forward? So make sure you have an international business development plan. By doing this at the start, you can cut down your costs in the long term. By having a long-term strategy, you will have much higher chance of success. So, I'm from UKTI. We're a government organization. How can we help? UKTI at the moment are in over 100 markets in the world. We have posts which we call UK embassies, high commissions, which are staffed by people from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. We have 2,400 staff. 1,300 of them staff are overseas to have expertise from in-market for your needs. We have 400 advisors and support staff in the nine English regions. These are business specialists, not government specialists, business specialists who will give you advice on how best your company can export. So what can we give? We can give strategic advice, market information. We can help you identify partners both in the UK and overseas. We can tell you all about the extra funding potential you can get from UKTI. We can tell you how you can go over to overseas markets, but very importantly, we can put you in contact with the right people overseas, wherever you want to do business, by working with our overseas network. We have numerous services available to do this. We actually have a pack of all this information, but I'll go through them quickly. Do pick them up at the desk. We have Passport to Export, which is for new and experienced exporters. Our Gateway to Global Growth, which is for more experienced exporters. We understand the importance of export communications, because every market has different needs, different requirements, and as a result, there's cultural differences, there's exchange rate fluctuations, there's other considerations that are specific to markets. We also help people go to trade shows, like Trade Show Access Program. We will give, by working via our accredited trade organizations, grants for companies to help to subsidize some of the cost of them exhibiting at the trade show. We do market visits all around the world. We do events and training as part of our regional network, and we will come to you and help supply this information. And if you wish to go overseas, we have an overseas market introduction service, which is quite simply our posts in all these markets overseas can work on your behalf to deliver the requirements you need. If you want to know who the logistics companies are, if you want to know what the barriers of entry are, these are the people that can give you that advice. So, the positives for exporting, just to summarize, offset the risks to your business, not putting all your eggs in one basket. You don't have to depend on your own market. As you can see in the UK over the last few years, we have had a recession. Not every market has a recession at the same time. Not every market grows at the same time. You can get better margins in other markets, you can get better return on investment. However, everything's not positive. There are some negatives. You have to worry about your IP. You have to worry about making sure you get your payments. You have to make sure that all of the extra documentation, paperwork that you need to do before you go into a market has been considered and thought about. And of course, this isn't easy to do. You have to have a long-term strategy. You cannot just think short-term, because as we all know, exchange rate fluctuations, our market, how volatile it can be, how fast it grows. Your product today might be suitable, but in a few years' time, because of changes in market, it might be there's more demand for your product because the local economy has greatly improved. So, two useful websites from my point of view is UKTI. That will give you information on how we can help you, how you can get an international trade advisor who will come speak to you from your region. This service is free and also open to export, where you can ask any question, has a lot of information to address any of your needs to make sure that you can export. If the answer's not there, ask it a question. You will get a response within 3 days. So don't just take my word for it now. I'm going to actually pass over to Damon Bonser, who's the director of Spinning Hat, who is a UK company that UKTI have helped.
Hello, my name's Damon from Spinning Hat. We're a gift manufacturer. We design all our gifts in the UK, manufacture out in the Far East, but still export a lot. So even though we're not made in the UK, we're designed here, but still we work a lot with UKTI. Who are we? Like I said, we're a gift manufacturer. It's contemporary gifting. It's all different types of products. But we didn't always do this kind of stuff. We started the business about 8 years ago as a distributor. So we were going out to the Far East, finding products, bringing them back to the UK. And that was fine in the early days, but we started to, well, really as the recession started to kick in, we found that suppliers weren't really innovating that much. So we started to build our own design team. I wouldn't say it was I suppose reactionary at the time, but how it actually played out was that it did our exports the world of good. As soon as we started designing our own products and having our own IP, suddenly we started to get a lot of interest internationally. And to be honest, through certainly the first few years of the recession, it was kind of our export market that kept us going. That was our biggest area of growth was international. Who do we sell to? I won't cover on this too long. We sell all over the world. We now have a US office. that we do export to a certain degree from the UK. We have a UK office as well. We have a Hong Kong office, but we service retailers really all around the world with either bespoke programs or our own products. Right. So now I'm going to talk a bit about our sort of how we've grown as an exporter. So where do we sell to? We sell pretty much to most countries around the world, really, with the exception, notably, of India and Africa. We don't really deal with at the moment. They're on our sort of hit list, and China not so much either. And that's more to do with the type of products that we make. That those consumer markets aren't quite a great fit for us. But types of people we sell to overseas, then, so retailers, so selling direct to people like Bonser, whatever, Galleries Lafayette, international distributors. So, for instance, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about these in a couple of slides' time. But people like will allocate a territory like Germany, overseas subsidiaries. So that would be our sort of internal sales really to places like the US and our Hong Kong office, and then overseas B2C. It's a very small market for us, and it's something we want to focus on. We are really structured as a B2B business at the moment, but we're looking to grow B2C. So how do we get started? So as I mentioned, our exports really start to kick off when we invested in our own IP, had our own, it is designed in the UK, and that means a lot to the export market. And that on the back of that started to generate a lot of PR. And again, at the time, we didn't have a PR agency, we couldn't afford one. So it was all kind of us in-house, working with blog sites online, giving them, sending them press packs and all the rest of it. And that actually, when it's your own product, it's a lot more newsworthy, so the kind of word gets out very quickly. So that really helped us. Things like trade shows, so things like the Birmingham trade show, like the one we're doing this week, you get a lot of international buyers come there. But then also we would do international trade shows, and again UKTI helped us sort of fund that, because in the early days it is a big expense getting out to places like Hong Kong where we typically do them. Cold calling and looking at your competitors' websites, to be honest, is a pretty cheap and quick way of finding. Certainly if you're looking for, retailers, you should be able to find the key retailers you should be selling to pretty easily just by doing online searches. But again, UKTI can help with that side of things, coming to events, coming to kind of meet the buyer events. But also, to be honest, if you're looking for a distributor, they're sometimes a little bit harder to find, and also finding a good one's a bit harder. So again, talk to your competitors, unless they're very, very protective. But normally it's on their website, you can chat to them. It's kind of, we sort of share information back and forth with our competitors. So I'm just going to go through now. Again, this is just from my point of view. I'm not an expert in this, just kind of from my experience, what we've sort of, I suppose, the different types of exporting options we've gone through, and that we currently run as well at the moment. So the obvious one really is, I suppose, a distributor. So you'll assign a territory like Germany or France, and say, okay, you get that territory exclusively. You do the trade shows. You have to support them normally. And again, for each option there's obviously pros and cons. But with this one, so this is how we do France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Most of Europe tourists will have a distributor in, but there will be places where we'll go direct. But the pros of this is very quick market penetration. So if you find the right distributor, they're going to be doing a trade show. They'll have a client list of hopefully thousands of retailers that they can very quickly get your product out there. There's virtually no setup costs. Your distributor is going to know all about the local compliance. So, and again, within the EU, that's less important. If your product's already legally cleared to sell in the UK, then you'll be fine EU-wise. But if you're looking to maybe US or some of the regions, like Australia, to be honest, there's some specific laws you need to know about for your product. And then there's a language and a cultural fit. They're likely to speak the language you don't. Cons: you lose control of your brand to a certain degree. You can try and work with your distributor to keep it, but they are going to be they're going to be looking after about probably. Well, our distributors look after some sort of 6 to 10 different competitor brands as well. There's a middleman margin, so they're going to take a cut. They're going to need to make money, so that can either result in your prices being bumped up, which is not great for the local market there, or you taking a lower margin and kind of trying to keep that price not inflated. And also key accounts are quite difficult. If you imagine your distributors, again, you're not at the forefront of their mind, so not necessarily always going to present your product to those key accounts. They we find distributors very good for the small and medium-sized retailers. Agents, I don't have a huge amount of experience in this. We don't really use them. I think we've got an agent in Ireland, but I won't hover on this slide really. Again, the basic, my understanding really with agents is that they're not going to hold stock. They're sort of selling on your behalf and they'll take a commission. So the commission is probably 10 or 15%. So it's more profitable, but they're not really as committed to the program, I suppose, because they've not got a warehouse full of stock that they're looking to sort of sell. But obviously pros, they're going to speak the language, they'll know the culture. You'd hope they bring a client list with them. The downside, I suppose, again, that brand representation. It's not your own sales guys out there selling. It's going to be this agent who's probably a sort of freelancer. So you lose a bit of control over that. And stock and logistics, just think about if you are using an agent and they've not got stock, whenever they get an order, you're going to have to deliver it to their customer. If it's in Belgium or Netherlands, that might be doable. But if you had an agent, it probably wouldn't work. If you had an agent a long way away and your warehouse is based in Europe and you've got an agent in Argentina, it's probably going to be quite expensive dealing with returns and deliveries. One way of doing it is just to actually do it from your domestic office. So we do a bit of that ourselves. So from our London office, we will directly work with international retailers. The good thing with that is obviously very cheap. You're completely in control of your brands. Your margins are your margins because there's no middleman. You can really focus on these key accounts. The downside, obviously, there's a language and a cultural difference often. Like for instance, with the US, we actually find it quite difficult dealing direct with the US from the UK because they do prefer, even though they speak the same language, they do prefer to work with US vendors. And there's also a certain way of working with US retail, whereas somewhere like a lot of the Scandinavian countries, I can't remember what was the Scandinavian country that popped up earlier that said it was very easy to work with, but we've definitely found, generally speaking, in Scandinavia, we don't need distributors there, we'll just work directly with them, because they get the way of working and they get the product, even if they speak a different language. Quality of service, so again, if you're trying to work direct with, for instance, like a big retailer out in Thailand or something, you're not going to be getting you're not going to probably be offering the best quality of service because you're not on the doorstep, you're in a completely different time zone. They might want to talk to you. It's kind of, it gets sort of tricky. There's always that delay of probably the quickest you can get back to them is 24 hours. And it's slower market penetration. You're not coming with you don't have your own list of clients, so you've got to gradually build that up. And then almost on the last one of the different options here, it says direct. That's what we actually did with our US business. We went through several iterations. We tried doing it direct, and that kind of worked initially. And that was through UKTI, helping us get out to the Hong Kong shows. We met lots of the large retailers. The US buyers do travel to places like Hong Kong. So we were meeting at the shows. That was great. We get the first order, but it was kind of tricky getting repeat orders again because you're not constantly on their doorstep. You're not chatting to them every day in the same time zone. Then actually with the US, we tried assigning a distributor, and that didn't really work because it's too much of an investment for them. It's too much of a high cost for a low margin on their side of things. So we sort of took the plunge a couple of years ago and opened up our own US office and put our own sales team there and all the rest of it. And that's worked really well for us in that market. I wouldn't do it in every single market. It wouldn't be feasible. But the US, we figured it's big enough. It's worth us doing that. It's worth us taking control of it. Fairly obvious pros. The cons, it's a bit slower, it's very expensive, you need to make sure you budget it for it, it's doable. And you've kind of got to learn all that local compliance stuff. Which again, the US isn't, none of them are too bad, but it's you've got to just, you don't want to forget about it. You can do a hybrid of, again, so the top one there, that's sort of saying, you can do a hybrid of your distributor and going direct, and we do that with certain economies, for instance like Canada. Our distributor will look after the smaller mediums and we will service doing bespoke design programs for the larger retailers out there. And then you can also do agents, I suppose, and your own business, kind of like we do in the US. And finally, joint ventures, again, I don't have a ton of experience on that, but I'm sure that is obviously another way that you can look to export. Okay, so I'm just going to go through now what the sort of things that we consider when we're looking at an export strategy, essentially, when we're looking at a country to export to. What are the kind of things that pop up in our heads? So there's obviously hundreds. These are just a few that came to mind. So I'm just going to pick on a few of them here. So cultural differences, I've mentioned that one. I don't need to go over that again. Import duties, anti-dumping. So if you were, I don't know. Okay, it'd probably be quite a bad idea if you're a candle maker, maybe based in the UK, this might be a reason not to export to the US because it's very high duties. I think it's something like 100%. So those are things to consider. But then the EU is very easy. It's a free trade zone. There's not going to be any import duties. Time zones, we've kind of touched on that. So what kind of quality of service do you want to offer to your clients? And again, with a distributor, that's fine being in a different time zone to get that. But I think when you're selling to the retailer or the end consumer, they're gonna expect a certain level of service. So that's something to think about. Order fulfillment and logistics. I kind of mentioned that with the agent. Really, if you've not got a local warehouse or stock on the ground or a local operation, how are you going to make deliveries? How are you going to accept returns? Structuring size export market. So I suppose I'm getting here. So, for instance, the reason we wouldn't set up our own office, for instance, in France, or have our own team selling there is we've got a great distributor that covers France, and the structure of the French sort of retail market is very much it's a lot of independent boutique shops. There's not so many mass retailers like you get in the US or UK or Germany. There's obviously Carrefour and things like that, but for our business, we do kind of gifting. There's not a huge amount of chain stores, so it's not really worth us dealing with those size accounts. So for us, France is perfect for a distributor to represent. And the last one, ROI, obviously. If you're going to set up your own office overseas, there's going to be a break-even point. It's going to be very expensive. Can you afford to fund that? And then just a few. There's a lot more ways. I'm sure UKTI can obviously help you. These are just the ones that we've really used and sort of for the last 4 years. So it's 4 years we've been doing our own design stuff and really exporting and using UKTI. And these are the ways they've helped us. So doing translations. So that top right corner, that's just the back of one of our products. We have to get stuff translated in all these languages, and UK kind of would be the match funders on anything like that. Market knowledge, same as the bottom point, really. Events training. You get a point of contact there. You can chat to them. You can get introduced to buyers, introduced to people at the kind of like the embassies or the consulates. That's how I found our sales director for the US business. I think my first point of contact was calling up my kind of rep at UKTI, who then put me in contact with the consulate in New York, and it kind of bounced from there, and I ended up getting a sort of short list of people to interview to run the office out in the US. Overseas market visits, so if you're flying out to meet buyers or you're flying to trade shows to work on stands of your distributors, UKTI can not match fund it, but there's money available to help. The Hong Kong trade shows, that's how we've used them for those TAP, the trade access programs. And again, it's not much funded, but it's good. It's a good amount of money, and we found it really helps, certainly in the early years. And you can also do things like you can sort of display underneath the UK pavilion, for instance, at the New York Gift Fair or the Hong Kong Gifts and Premium Show, and kind of a lot of the headaches are just taken care of. And we did do that for the first couple of times in Hong Kong. It really made the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. And international product testing. So if there's, it's typically with retailers, we get it in the UK that the certain retailer will have extra surplus requirements for product testing, and if that happens to be a foreign retailer, an overseas retailer that you're exporting to, and they're saying, right, you need to get this test that may not be legally required, it's just a term of doing business with that retailer, then you can also get some sort of I'm sure again I can't remember if it's match funding or just some grant to help you cover the cost of that. Okay, almost done. There's only a couple more slides. I'll just talk about how we finance our exports, and it's all fairly obvious stuff. You kind of, if it's an overseas retailer or distributor that you don't know of, you're going to obviously try and get your money up front. You don't want to really release any stock until you've been paid for it. But with certain retailers, I'm sure if we were dealing direct from the UK with US retail, they wouldn't be paying up front. So you'd have to probably invoice them and let the stock go before getting paid. So then maybe look at things like discounting your invoices. It is possible with your banks. You can do that with overseas retailers. Probably want to get credit insurance out as well. And then I suppose that's if you're selling stock that you've already invested in from your domestic warehouse, maybe. But anything you're doing like FOB or made-to-order product, again, retailers don't always play ball, but certainly with distributors, we'd ask them for a 30% deposit. Kind of gives you a bit of comfort that they're not going to just disappear, because it is hard to kind of credit check and reference distributors. Retailers are a bit more, they're kind of either listed on the stock exchanges or they're kind of in the news, but distributors you often don't know one from the other. But if you are doing any major order stuff, just hold on to like your original shipping docs until you get your balance payments and all the rest of it, so that they can't clear it through their customers. Okay, and then very quickly, we don't want to sort of hover on this too long. Just these are some of the ideas that came to me, and how do we control risk when we're financing exports? So obviously, get some references from them. Who do they sell to? Also, who do they buy from? Probably some of your competitors. Get them to fill out credit application forms, obvious stuff. Chat to your competitors. If you're looking at a distributed tender out to 2, 3, 4 different distributors, don't just give it to one. Do credit checks, if possible. Maybe on a distributor it won't really be feasible, like a Russian distributor. I don't know how you'd credit check that. And then look at what other brands are going to carry. If they're a right fit for your business. Okay, that's pretty much me done. Just sort of finish off just saying what Spinning Hat planning to do moving forward with export. So our US growth is a big focus for us at the moment. We want to focus on B2C. That is, that's tiny for us, but at the moment that's tiny. But we want to grow that into one of our core sort of sales channels, and again, that's an opportunity to export. Most of our B2C consumers at the moment are based in the US, and we just don't give them any sort of real service at the moment. So that's something we're focusing on. Direct sales to international retailers, talked about that. That's a big push for us. International brand awareness, there are things you can do to promote exports, to help get your name out there. So things like pop-up shops, and we're looking at doing pop-up shops in German retail, like shopping malls and things like that, just to kind of drive traffic through our distributor and also get awareness with the key accounts out there, and supporting our distributors really with the small and medium sized retailers.